They expected a huge invasion. The Allies gave them confusion instead. The plan depended on illusion. Summer 1944. Allied commanders faced a problem of scale: how to get men and material across the English Channel while convincing the German high command they would land somewhere else. The operation required not only ships and soldiers, but also misdirection at every level. The solution combined art, engineering, radio, and theater. Units were organized specifically to create the impression of an army where none existed. Historians later labeled these units the Ghost Army. Their mission was simple in description and complex in practice: make the Germans believe there were American formations in places the Allies did not intend to strike. If the deception worked, German commanders would hold forces in the wrong locations, weakening their ability to stop the real invasion. They built an army of lies. The Ghost Army was a deliberate, official instrument. It was not a side project. It received orders, budgets, and timelines. Its members included artists, sound technicians, engineers, and camouflage experts. They were assigned to put rubber tanks, wooden planes, and fake supply dumps in locations that German reconnaissance would report as real military formations. But deception alone would not be enough. The operation required consistent layers of proof: vehicles on roads, radio traffic in the patterns of real units, and falsified signals that German intelligence would accept. The organizers understood how German commanders evaluated information. They targeted procedures as much as appearances. They studied how an army moved, how it spoke on the radio, and how intelligence officers confirmed identities. The objective was to create a credible alternative order of units, and then let German decision-makers act on that false order. Perception can decide a battle. In early planning sessions, Allied planners studied German command culture. They knew German field commanders relied on timely reports and confirmation from multiple sources. Allied deception planners designed their ruses to emulate those multiple sources. Inflatable tanks went where reconnaissance planes would see them. Dummy landing craft were placed where observers expected staging areas. Specialized radio operators transmitted traffic that replicated the unique patterns of real divisions. Some teams even staged controlled movements on roads and set up decoy camps with vehicles arranged in authentic unit formations. Each layer of deception was deliberate and tested against a checklist. The Ghost Army did not seek to fool a single observer. It sought to generate corroboration across intelligence channels. One false report could shift reserves. Timing mattered. The deception had to be credible not just once, but over weeks. Allied planners synchronized the Ghost Army operations with other elements of strategic misdirection. While real buildup occurred in southern England, the Ghost Army created a parallel buildup in locations that the Germans expected. The goal was to convince the German high command that the main invasion would occur at a different point on the coast. By the time the Allies were ready to launch in Normandy, the Germans would have already allocated significant reserves to the wrong sectors. That reallocation would reduce the defenders available where the Allied landing would actually come. Delay was part of the victory. The Ghost Army's equipment was not intended for combat. Inflatable tanks, plywood artillery, painted canvas, and wooden aircraft were designed to look right from above and from a distance. They were inexpensive and quick to move. Radio operators used captured call signs and matched known radio habits of specific German-assessed units. Fake orders and controlled leaks of information further reinforced the ruse. Intelligence officers in the German command received what looked like consistent evidence. That evidence prompted commanders to keep troops where they thought the threat was greatest. The deception created a strategic mismatch. German defenses were strong where they were not needed and thin where the attack came. They bet on German caution. The effectiveness of the Ghost Army was not uniform across all German commands, but the operation did produce measurable effects. German field reports show units held in reserve in the Pas-de-Calais area and other regions long after the Allies had begun operations in Normandy. Hitler himself received assessments that reinforced his belief in an invasion at a channel point other than Normandy. High-level German decisions were shaped by consistent reports and by the institutional preference for caution in the face of uncertain intelligence. That caution played directly into Allied plans. The deception undermined enemy mobility, and mobility was precisely the resource the defenders needed to blunt the beachhead. Mistaken certainty is as dangerous as ignorance. The story of the Ghost Army also shows how military power depends on information control. An army can win battles by having superior numbers and firepower, but it can also win by shaping the enemy's view of the battlefield. In 1944, the Allies had the firepower. They also had the willingness to invest in shaping German thinking. That investment required discipline. Illusion had to adhere closely to known patterns. If the ruse deviated from expected behavior, German analysts would spot the discrepancy. The planners therefore used actual unit histories, recorded radio patterns, and known movement schedules as templates. That is why the Ghost Army included people who understood behavior and pattern, not just people who could make models look convincing. The enemy acted on the lie. Operational security complicated the work. The teams had to maintain secrecy while staging visible deception. They had to ensure that the ruse produced reports that would be translated into valid German intelligence. To do that, they coordinated with double agents, with controlled leaks, and with Allied intelligence units that controlled the flow of information. In other words, the Ghost Army did not operate alone. It was part of a larger deception system that included diplomatic channels, intelligence, and local operations. The result was an integrated program that multiplied the impact of each visible fake. Lies must be believable to be effective. Beyond the direct effects on German troop dispositions, the deception campaign had broader strategic consequences. By tying down reserves far from the crossing points, and by creating confusion about the timing of the main attack, Allied planners widened their operational window. Commanders on the ground could press their advantage knowing enemy reinforcements were constrained by false assumptions. The delay in German countermeasures meant that Allied logistics and follow-on forces had more space to operate. In short, what looked like a trick produced operational freedom. Freedom came from enemy error. The Ghost Army also had costs and limits. It required manpower, coordination, and sustained attention. The teams were not immune to detection. In some local cases, German reconnaissance noted inconsistencies. When that occurred, planners adjusted. The operation succeeded because it accepted small, controlled risks, and because it corrected rapidly when anomalies appeared. The planners measured success not by perfect illusion, but by the extent to which the deception diverted German resources at critical moments. They adjusted when the plan wavered. There are clear examples where the deception directly affected decisions. German commanders delayed major redeployments even after initial reports of Allied landings. That delay cost the defenders time they could not recover. Allied archives show intercepted German orders that required units to hold position pending confirmation that never came. Those confirmations were not forthcoming because the Ghost Army and Allied intelligence had structured the narrative to resist change. By the time the Germans could see the reality, Allied forces had consolidated. Timing swallowed the advantage. The human element matters in this story. The Ghost Army included visible personalities, artists who learned to arrange military formations, technicians who learned to mimic radio signatures, and officers who learned the psychology of enemy commanders. Those people worked within strict military frameworks. They had to be credible to their own side as well. The units received training and were judged by military standards. Individuals faced the same demands as regular soldiers: effective execution under pressure. The difference was the object of their labor. They fought by causing the enemy to misallocate forces. People made the plan real. After D-Day, historical records show the ripple effects. German high command retained a significant number of divisions to defend the region the Allies had pretended to threaten. Those divisions could not be freed quickly. The delay allowed Allied forces to establish beachheads, to land follow-on units, and to push inland. The deception did not win the war by itself, but it created conditions that reduced Allied casualties and increased operational momentum. That is a decisive contribution in a campaign where timing and reserves determine success. Contribution without direct combat. The Ghost Army's reputation took time to form. For decades, many of its records remained classified. Veterans of these units returned to civilian life, carrying stories that few in public could verify. Only later did researchers and historians piece together the full scope. When the records emerged, the account confirmed what veterans had long said. The operation was real, deliberate, and consequential. Public recognition followed, but too late for many participants to receive immediate acclaim. The strategic lessons, however, were timely and enduring. Recognition came slowly. For a modern audience, the lesson is clear and practical. Military effectiveness depends on shaping adversary decisions as much as on sheer force. Deception is a force multiplier. It requires insight into how opponents think and how they establish confidence in reports. The Ghost Army exploited the mechanisms of decision-making. It produced false premises that German officers accepted, and those false premises led to concrete strategic choices. When a commander organizes forces around false assumptions, he loses options. The Allies made the Germans lose options. The enemy's choices were the weapon. In ending, the Ghost Army is a story of organized imagination applied to warfare. It is not a tale of theatrics for its own sake. It is a record of deliberate, disciplined action that altered enemy calculations and contributed to operational success on D-Day. For an American audience that values ingenuity and results, the operation offers a clear model: skillful planning, coordinated execution, and an understanding of how decisions are made can yield decisive effects without direct combat. That is the core reason this episode holds power for viewers who care about U.S. history and military craft. Intelligence, not spectacle, won a key advantage. If you want more episodes like this, hard facts, names, dates, and the strategies behind them, there are 5 more stories ready: audacious raids, secret codes, industrial feats, and the scientists who shaped the post-war world. Each tells a variation of the same theme: American organization, creativity, and resolve changed the course of history.